Okay, hi, welcome to the Unfiltered Psych Talk series. I'm Dr. Sunita from the Holistic Psychotherapy Center, and I'm here with my colleagues here, Dr. Priya, Hani, Shreya, Shirley, and Andrew. Right? So all of us here are a team of psychotherapists and counselors, and we really believe in talking about mental health without any filters. So what you will be experiencing with us is we'll talk a little bit about research, a little bit on tips, and also our own challenges and emotions as we journey with our clients and of course our own journey also. So today we are going to focus to talk about suicide, right? So during the COVID period, you might have read in the Straits Times that there is a rise in the number of cases of suicides. And if you look at the numbers itself, there is about 452 suicides last year, and this figure has been the highest since 2012, right? And SOS also has commented that there is 13% increase since 2019. So what you're noticing is a rise in the number of suicides, right? And in fact, SOS had commented that besides this rise, they also noticed that in the last 5 years, suicide has been on an increasing trend. So this is one of the reasons why we want to talk about suicide today. And we also noticed that the suicide cases is across all age group. It's not like only the young or the elderly, although these two groups have higher numbers, right? And the other thing we noticed was just to put into perspectives, right? Suicide is about 2% of the total deaths in Singapore. And if you compare that against accidents, for example, which is about 89 or 90, and this is definitely a worrying trend where we are losing people to suicide a lot more than a traffic accident, for example. And the World Population Review has mentioned that in Singapore, it's 11.2 um, rate for every 100,000 people that are around. So if you look at it in those numbers itself, is actually what we are noticing is that people have been turning to suicide as a way of coping, especially when they're facing very challenging situations. And when we look at age group, we notice that those between the age of 10 to 29 tend to have the one of the higher rates of suicide. And males tend to account more for suicide as compared to female. And these are some things we want to talk about, like how come males are committing suicide more than female, right? And we also know that for every person who has committed suicide, there is about, I don't remember the numbers offhand, but I think it's 6 or 7 survivors who have attempted suicide. So these are definitely worrying trends for us. And this is why we want to talk about suicide very openly today. So with the whole team here, we are going to be really talking about things that is questions that we have experienced ourselves in our work. And also when we are like searching through media and all of that. So there will really be no filter. We're going to go straight into it. So the intention here is not to provide therapy, but it's more for educational purposes, right? At the end of this whole session, we will talk about helplines that you could turn to. And of course, you can contact any one of us here also. So if the team is ready, I'm going to start with the first question. And the question is that why do you think people commit suicide?
In my recent experience, what I have noticed is that there could be many, many reasons for why people attempt and commit suicide. And sometimes there could just be reasons that are forever unseen and unknown. Um, an overarching thing that I have often noticed is really it is a cry for help. And at some point, for various reasons, they may be going through various circumstances in life. It could be a loss of a loved one, it could be grieving a loss of a loved one. I mean, through COVID, we've obviously seen all of that. Isolation has been one. Sometimes just like job loss, just sheer hopelessness, academic failures. Uh, but at the end of it, it is almost like it is just so too overwhelming for them to handle whatever that situation is. And it is really, in some sense, I mean, it may not be that they really want to commit suicide, but they're just like so overwhelmed and so helpless, and this is like their last call for, or like last cry for help, like help me, literally, like help me. So when I'm dealing with my clients, sometimes it's very important to understand what is that unmet need. It could be reasonable, it could be unreasonable, that's something that we can tackle later, but really it is an unmet need, uh, which is something quite telling for all of us as human beings, that another human being is feeling so vulnerable and so helpless, that amongst all of us, he or she is finding himself so alone that nobody is listening, nobody is helping. And I think that need kind of, needs to be addressed. And so one thing that I do want to really sound out is, even on during those times when you really really feel alone, there is help. It may not occur to people around you, it may not come from the loved ones. Perhaps, that's the wrong door that you are knocking, or maybe they are not capable at that point in helping you, but does not mean that help is not available. But of course there are, I mean, if you look at a textbook answer in terms of why people commit suicide, then that could range from mental illnesses to trauma to abuse to, as I said, academic failure, job loss, sometimes even chronic diseases. Just the burden of carrying chronic pain and chronic disease and feeling like a burden on somebody else, that could propel people to thinking about suicide. But really, I think it's a cry for help. It is a cry for
Thank you, Priya. Shreya, you want to share?
Yeah. So I also wanted to add, of course, there are many reasons, starting with relationships, financial burdens, stress at work, prolonged depression. And in my recent work with my clients, I've observed relationships has been one of like a major cause. And it really stands out for me how, sometimes we all have we all are sensitive to others' needs. And I have observed that some of my clients cannot really deal with, for example, a breakup or a divorce. So, it's very, very devastating for them. And that is something which has really stood out in the work I have done with my clients. And really not knowing where to go next, so it's like they really don't know what are the other coping mechanisms and what do I do after that. So it's like the world has ended. Because for example, if I talk about relationships, the person feels that this was the person whom I loved, and now I don't have anyone, so what next? So I think that is where I think and then the negative thoughts of course drive them continuously in that. And yes, definitely, then our work starts, and then definitely how to really make them know there are different coping mechanisms, and how how to distance themselves from the negative thoughts is something which I do with them.
Okay. Thank you, Shreya. Thank you, Priya. So, so just to summarize, right, what I hear from both of you is that the reasons can be very varied and very broad. From academic to home situation to relationships, it's really broad, right? And the other thing I was hearing was the word overwhelming keeps coming up, right? That is very overwhelming. And if we look at it from the angle of 2H, then it's really the feeling of that this is hopeless and no one can help me. So it's also a helplessness that's happening. So as you're saying this, the other thing that came to my mind is what people usually say when someone commits suicide, right? The things I've heard over my lifespan so far is the person is attention seeking. They're selfish, not thinking about their family, parents and things, or they're being very impulsive, right? So just wondering, these are statements that are made by people around us and sometimes by family members of those who have passed on. So just wondering, what are your thoughts about this, where people say that they're impulsive, attention seeking, or selfish, for example?
I think one of the difficulties in understanding suicide and the reasons for why people turn to that as a solution to their problems is essentially what Priya and Shreya just shared as well, is how do we understand what is a very unique perspective and the context of an individual going through something so incredibly hard and terrible that the average person without that context may feel that those things are the case, right? That someone is being selfish, and that of course the pain left on the people, whether it be family or friends, will feel a sense of that for sure. But I think our job as counselors is being able to try and understand that very unique context that that person is coming from. So in younger people, for example, if it's trying to put yourself in the shoes of someone going through, O levels, the stress of exams, maybe someone that's additionally being bullied or has been bullied for several years, and in addition is also receiving abuse from family at home, perhaps. These are, compounded enough of a reason to make someone feel like there is nothing better beyond, right? There is nothing better in life. And I think particularly, at least I see this a lot in younger people now in Singapore. So I think it's easy for people to say that it's a selfish act, and that, I guess impulsiveness is maybe something we will speak about a little bit more due to media and the sort of sensationalization of suicide as well. But I think without understanding the true context of the individual, it's impossible to say. But obviously, everything when it comes to mental health and well-being is in a sense selfish as well. So people are entitled to that too.
Thank you, Andrew, for sharing that. Yes, honey, please.
And I agree with Andrew, right? So, like without knowing what's actually going on for that person, it can be so impossible to fully understand why that person decides to hurt themselves or to attempt suicide. And so when they're experiencing so much despair and so much hopelessness, that what we like you mentioned earlier on, they don't know what to do, and that could be the only solution that they know, and it's like a way to end their misery. And for the family or for close friends, for those who lose or to have someone suicidal, the heartache, the fear can be very overwhelming. And because they can't deal with this worry, this heartache, this fear of losing this person, and this may lead to feelings of anger or frustration. And these feelings itself can, I think, lead some people to believe that suicide is a selfish thing to do, because they're not thinking about me, they're just doing it for themselves, but what about me? So it's more of like how they are coping it themselves, because the people who are involved in their lives, they need help themselves, because they may not know how to deal with their spouse or their child or their best friend who is going through this suicidal thoughts. So and that's when the anger or the frustration, and then the all the words of you being selfish, trying to get attention, and all started to surface.
Thank you, Hernie. And I realized that both Andrew and yourself talked not only about the person who has committed suicide, but also the people who are left behind with their family, right? So thanks for bringing the other angle of that. Yes, Priya, please share.
Just adding on to what Andrew and Hernie shared, oftentimes we think suicide is impulsive. But if we were to think about it, as a species, we have a very strong survival instinct. So for somebody to go against that instinct, that means something really, really powerful or something really overwhelming has happened. So it kind of requires, I would say, for the lack of a better word, but some sense of that fearlessness. It's not easy. It doesn't come as as easy like, oh, I had a thought and I went ahead and I did this act. It is not easy for anyone to do that. And I feel it is a myth that we think that people don't consider their loved ones who are left behind. They do. In fact, a lot of times they withhold what they are feeling, or they keep that suppressed only because of what people around them may feel or say, or in whatever circumstances there are. Sometimes even approaching a counselor, the family may feel like a lot of stigma, and therefore the person does not reach out for help. So they are considering all those factors. But we have to understand that for someone to kind of go beyond that survival instinct means that he or she is in dire need. It is that overpowering for that individual that right now it's almost like every door is shut, and no matter where I go, I am not getting what I need. And I'm not even saying what I want, I'm saying what I need. It is becoming a need at that point in time. So I hesitate to call anybody who is contemplating that it is impulsive. They've probably thought through this many times before they've actually gone through it. So imagine that person replaying this, going through this so many times. It can be quite devastating just to go through that process again and again. And so depression or isolation or just this loneliness, I think, is one of the biggest causes of suicide, as we know. A lot of folks at some point have become so like they feel that they are so alone that they feel that nobody is really, it's not going to make any difference to anyone whether I live or I survive. So it's not coming from a space of selfishness as much as like nobody cares. Even if I disappeared from here, nobody cares. So it's important that we kind of sit in that person's shoes and think, versus calling it a selfish act or an impulsive act. I also feel folks who at one point do commit suicide, they probably have left some telltale signs which we failed to pick up, or which people around them failed to pick up. So I don't think in that sense it is a selfish act or an impulsive act. In fact, sometimes people think that, no, let me unburden the people around me. I don't want to burden them anymore with my, mental issues or my depression. So let me just, get out of their way. So hesitate to call it really a selfish or an impulsive act. I think really what they need is a little bit more kindness, a little bit more hearing, a little bit more listening to. Not that we have to give in to their needs, but just a little bit more listening to.
Actually, for my opinion for that,
Yeah.
right, I think some of the people commit suicide because they think they rather don't have them with the family members, that they're better off without me. It's a kind of the thoughts actually sacrifice themselves for the better of the others, especially for the elderlies. They are sick, they think I'm the burden, so I'd rather kill myself so that I reduce the pain for myself and also reduce the pain for my family. So these kind of thoughts, I think it's not selfish at all. It's actually for the better.
Thank you, Shirley and Priya, for bringing those angles, right? But the reality is all these labels are never helpful. And in fact, we cause families who have lost their loved ones more pain. So sometimes when we don't know what to say, perhaps it's even better not to say something, right? Because when we say things like, oh, your child was selfish, or they didn't think about you, how come they... these things are definitely not providing any comfort. And at the same time, it causes a lot more pain. And so thanks for bringing those angles also, that sometimes people commit suicide is really because they care for the people around them. And they sincerely think that the world is a better place without them. Although we know it's not a reality, right? But at that moment, that is what's going through their mind. And also the reality of what Priya was also mentioning earlier, that they have tried again and again and again and again to survive, right? And they have entertained these thoughts of suicide again and again and again and again before it ever happens. So I guess the idea of compassion and kindness is really important, right? That we really are not walking in anyone's shoes. It's best not to comment because we don't know. Just like each one of us will not know the other person's story in detail. So the idea of kindness really is so important here, especially when we're talking to someone who has lost a loved one. So earlier I mentioned about men usually tend to commit suicide more than women, or rather complete suicide more than women, although we know that women attempt more suicide. Now, who are the other people who are at a higher risk of committing suicide? Just so that people who are listening in can have some idea, not that we are profiling people, but there's some idea of that possibility that there's a group of people who are slightly higher risk. And who would that be?
In terms of male and a female, the male usually is more tend to commit suicide, kill themselves, especially in the Chinese society. I don't know the Western society. Andrew, maybe you can comment further. In the Chinese society, they say men should shed the blood, can bleed but cannot shed the tears. You should be like a stone of the family, never cry, you know. So if you cry, you are just like, you are not brotherhood, you are like a scissors. So this kind of labor and this kind of words make the men tend to be suppress their feeling. They don't allow to express their feeling openly, or even they not allowed to cry. So when they are got the things tougher in their life, what they can do? They can suffer in the pain. They continue suffering until one day, suffering no longer is so painful. They do the self-harm, they do the substance abuse, they do alcohol, drugs, but all these cannot end in their psychological pain. What do? The only escape for them is to kill themselves. So killing for them, for the men, is actually due to the long-term effect of suppress of the feeling. And the suicidal actually is for them to cry is a taboo. You should not cry at all. That is the one of the reasons cause the men's suicidal rate is higher. Yeah.
Yeah, and taking from Shirley's point, I attended a suicide prevention training, and this point actually was brought out about why actually men don't come for help, or why men commit suicide more than women. And I think there were two interesting revelations from there which really stood out. One was the mindset and the beliefs. So when I say mindset, it can be, sometimes while during childhood or in their upbringing, men supposedly, they believe that they are more stronger, or if they talk about their feelings openly, then it's like it will not show them as a strong person. So I think, these two were very important pointers that came out, which was, what is that they believe and what their mindset is. So I think men are generally more vulnerable as a group. And in Singapore, elderly above 60 was, the most, the vulnerable group who committed suicide. So yeah, that is the numbers here.
So Andrew,
yes.
Do you have any idea in your, because you are come from London, right? If I'm not
Andrew, yeah.
I come from Oxford, but yeah, I'm from the UK. But I've been in Singapore
UK.
for
So
10 years.
how's the culture there for the men? Are they like Chinese culture saying, oh, you should not cry at all? So this is a curious question for you.
Yeah, so, I can only characterize an opinion based on my experience of the UK 10 years ago, right? So I've lived here for a very long time now. But I think the feeling is probably universal to men wherever you are, actually. And I think it does persist in the UK. And I think that, anyone who probably counsels expats here will probably feel the same, that there's probably a fairly tremendous burden on the male as well, because of the financial success that is also required of individuals to, prop up the family. And not to say that females obviously aren't doing that more in Singapore now as well, but traditionally in the West, I think as well, it's been very normal that the male has to bear that burden. And I think in a very competitive society, particularly here in Singapore with, some of the bigger corporations, investment or banking, the stresses of being in such a competitive financial or professional environment rather can be incredibly challenging in addition to having to look after the family. So I think those things are definitely present in that side, the sort of man of the house. But as you said, and as others have said, I think there is less of people are less inclined to share their emotions now as men. But I would have to say that the positive news, I think, is that it is somewhat of a generational thing, that typically, it is among older men, particularly people maybe above their 40s now, that do feel that way. And in some of the work that I do with youth, the willingness to share between men and women is much more equal now. And I speak to and meet with a lot of individuals who are willing to share as males, and a lot of this can come from things like gender dysphoria, for example, but more often than not, the access to online resources, resources which are anonymous, allow people that place to have a voice, which is great news.
Thank you, Andrew. Now, just wondering, so we talked about men, we also spoke about elderly. Is there any other group that's more vulnerable that we should keep a lookout for?
I read somewhere that suicide is the second leading cause of death among the youngsters, in particular between, I think, 15, 16 years old to 30 or 29 years old. And this was printed, I read it, is globally. So it is a worrying trend at the moment to see that the youth is, the suicide rate for youth is increasing.
Thanks, Annie, for bringing that up, because I think in Singapore, I think it was published in the Straits Times, if I'm not mistaken, that is 10 to 29 years old. And while we used to think that it's the elderly and people who are like, career crisis and all that who might commit suicide, the age has become as young as 10, which I think is a very worrying trend right now. If very young, also turning to suicide as a solution to their life challenges. So just wondering from there, right, that what can be done to prevent maybe young people, right? Just because we have limited time, I'm going to just focus on the young people. What can we do to prevent young people from turning towards suicide?
From parents, I mean, like in the household, parents, teachers, and I think learning the warning signs of teen suicide or suicide can actually prevent an attempt. And when these warning signs have been identified, and that's when when they can keep an open communication with the teenager, the youth, and that will allow them to have this belief or understanding that we care and they care, rather than being alone. Because again, youth this time, they have a lot of changes in education, in the way body changes, friends, and things like that, and they may not know how to deal with that. So a lot of this pressure, a lot of this stress, sometimes they, like again, we've heard this a lot. We have to, about the new norm. We have to accept the new norm. We have to, because of COVID as well. But for them, it's really hard for them to just accept and to just bear with all these changes, because they don't know how to adapt, and how do they process, and how do they identify their emotions. And teen years are filled with major changes, right? So the strong feelings combination of confusion, fear, and doubt may affect the way they problem solve, the way they make decisions. So again, in Singapore, it is important for them to succeed. I mean, as much as we understand mental well-being is important, but again, nothing really changed, because they still have to ace that tests. They still have to sit for exams. So all this stress and all these changes can make our youth become more stressful, and this pressure is not being met. So I think knowing and seeing and understanding the warning signs may help them.
Thank you, Hani, for bringing that up, right? So I'm just naturally going to go into that. So what are some of the warning signs that friends, teachers, parents, siblings can look out for? What would be some of these warning signs?
Actually, when the kids try to, some needs of their internal needs haven't been met, so their behavior will be changed. For example, they are not going to school, they start not doing the homework, they keep on complaining, saying, I don't like the food, I hate you're fighting at home. And all these are the warning signs of behavior changes, and the underlying, there are some needs they need to convey to the parents, to the teachers, to the peers, but they don't know how to convey the words properly. Then they use action, they use act out. So these are the warning signs we can look after. So actually, one of my clients, they are in the they are in the marriage divorce stage, so they are fighting every day. So my client come to see me, say, okay, my kids told me, the son is primary 5 at that time, say, I'm not happy, I want to kill myself. So she literally asked me, is that my kids are trying to seek my attention? And recently, he also don't do the homework, he escaped from the school. The teacher complained almost every week to her, and she need to work. So she feels frustrated. Why my kids don't understand the situation? And it also threatened me, say, he's not happy, I'm going to kill himself. So after 10 sessions, he started to realize actually that the kids feel insecure. During the divorce proceeding or the conflict or marital process, the kids see the home like a battlefield because they keep on fighting. And the kids feel losing, and the family or father or mother. And the intention, subconsciously, he don't want the parents' divorce. He want to ending the situation. That's why he keep on telling the mother, I'm not happy, I'm not happy. But the mother never take it seriously, because the mother is so overwhelming with her own situation. Eventually, the kids one day send a message to the mother, say, Mom, I'm gone. Then the mother is it's so frightened. And I say, what happened? Where are you? Eventually, she managed to find him and open these cases with me, say, oh, my kids got an issue. So deeper down the counseling issue, we find out actually the kids' lack of security, the kids lack of being loved, because the parents are vital. So he don't feel is being loved at all. After the few sessions of counseling, make her realize, oh, the kids need to be secure, the kids need to be loved and need to be encouraged. There's no longer the issue the kids are saying, I'm not happy, or I'm not want to kill myself. The kids no longer mention that. So when the kids in a situation feel underlying needs, love needs, belonging needs, all these survival needs not being met, then they use a behavior to show it up.
To what Shirley said, when you asked earlier on, Sunita, about the warning signs, the warning signs that my clients' parents have shared with me, it's when their child suddenly lose interest in something that they love. Like, take for example, if they love to run, they just don't want to run anymore. And also, one of the common warning signs that I've heard from them is the sleeping pattern. Some of them will sleep too little, they can't sleep, or some will sleep for a very long time. and changes in weight, and also the appetite. So again, like declining school performances as well. So these were the common warning signs that I have heard from my clients' parents. So these are the warning signs that perhaps we can also look for, or we can observe from our child.
Yeah, I think to add to one of them is also, if the child isolates himself or herself suddenly and doesn't talk to anyone. So usually like children do share things with their parents or friends, but sometimes they could just isolate themselves or be in their room for a very long time. And usually like you see the changes in their behavior in terms of not sharing anything. They are just in their own world. So I think that is also one of the things that can be checked.
I think it's also important to listen, like really listen deeply. Sometimes they do drop phrases like, I wish I wasn't here, or I wish I could just kill myself, or just, be out of this space. And what would the world be like if I'm not here? And they may say it in a very, almost like slipping it through, but I think it's important to be at least aware of those phrases, not like brush away from them. If you hear something like that, take the time to kind of connect with your child. It may be nothing, but it also helps to kind of connect and just listen at that point. It's not about like, oh, there is a problem and I'm going to fix it. Sometimes they just want to be heard. So it's important to kind of just watch out for some of these phrases that they may drop by, like, there's no point in living anymore, it's all empty, nobody likes me. It could be just we're talking about young folks, right? Teenagers, they all have fear issues, or sometimes feeling that I was excluded in a group, sometimes excluded even on social media, and stuff like that. But noticing these changes, noticing their, as Hani and Shirley, Shreya mentioned, mood and appetite and sleep, but also in terms of what they are talking. So one is like they'll get isolated, they don't want to talk, but they may drop these subtle hints in their talking. Some of the clients I have interacted with have actually written some stuff, maybe on their blog sites, maybe put up something on Instagram, which is very anonymous and very cryptic. But it's still important to be aware of, it kind of gives an idea as to what's going on. Sometimes they're giving away their things, like, oh, this is my favorite thing, and I want to give this away to someone, or just kind of meeting up with people whom they love as if it's like their one last time. So I do feel that there is a huge need to connect more deeply than anything else. As I said, it may be nothing, but it's important to kind of at least be there. We are all in this very big rut of a lot of doing, especially like work from home. Everybody's busy. And often in that space, we forget to connect with each other. We're connected through our mobiles, but we're not connected like really face to face. And I think that plays a huge role, especially during these times when teens are feeling very isolated. They haven't been to school, they haven't seen their friends in person with all the lockdowns and everything else. And everybody is a social animal to some extent. Everybody needs that socialization. So it's important to kind of watch out for those things as well. Yeah.
So thanks for bringing up a whole variety, right? So what I'm hearing is that there is a lot of behavioral things that they're doing, and the triggers can be anything from fights within the family. It can be friendship based, it can be school based. So there are behavioral signs that they show. There are also cognitive things that through what they're saying, you can actually capture, like life is not worth living, or nobody will miss me even if I disappear, or you don't care, you don't love me, all of that. So there is the behavioral, there is the cognitive, which usually comes out verbally. Then there is the emotional, where they may cry more, or there are more outbursts of either anger, sadness, things like that. And of course, the idea also that many a time that the child might even be showing a lot of symptoms of giving away things. Or in some cases, we also notice that they're really good at hiding, right? Because I've come across parents talking to me about the guilt of not recognizing the warning signs. They're like, I knew the warning signs, but I didn't see it. Right. And then the parents starts to beat themselves up for it. That why didn't I see it? It's like, how come? Right. And this is the part I just wanted to say, that while there are a lot of warning signs, as we have just discussed, some children and some adults know how to hide it too. And sometimes when you're thinking about it over a period of time, you may not be able to notice it. So if there is a friend or someone that you have lost and you did not see the warning signs, for example, please be compassionate to yourself also, because the reality is that sometimes it's at length. They struggle with it for 2-3 years, and you may not see the signs anymore, right? And we also don't want to get to a state where we blame ourselves for everything. Right? So while we want to support, we don't want to go into a blaming stage. Yes, Andrew, please share.
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on that, because something that Shreya mentioned earlier as well, I think is relevant, at least to youth in particular, is that in a lot of the clients that I see, and in youth today, the access to things like social media, for example, and the expectations of people wanting some kind of love or response from people, but it also the addiction to things like games. So unfortunately now, games are made to be incredibly addictive by the people who make them, but they're also now released on mobile phones, which are becoming more widely used by younger people. Is that as parents, we might not be able to understand what they're addicted to at any one point in time. And we may see similar behavior, such as withdrawal, to someone's room, for example, when someone is gaming or using their device for an extended period of time. So we may see things like that. And I think as parents, there's probably an assumption by some to say, he or she is probably just playing games in his room. He's been like that. He's a teenager. He's grumpy. He's probably just in his room playing games. And I think it's at that point where, some of the signs may start to gel with assumptions that we may have. Is that it's so crucial, as I know a few people have also said, to make sure that we keep lines of communication open, and make sure that we really listen, as Priya said.
Thank you for that, because that's always the challenge, right? That sometimes when we hear someone cry for help by saying those words, that life is not worth living, or I'm just going to withdraw, or I'm going to teach you a lesson by just staying away from you and all of that. Sometimes we might get to a state where we take it as, oh, okay, since he or she is talking about it, it won't happen, right? Because that's a possibility of when some people start to think like that we're talking about it means it won't happen, right? Or the reverse, because you talk about it, maybe I should shut down the topic so that you won't do it. So just coming to that part of it, right? I'm just shifting the conversation from the general part of it to parents and caregivers, right? So what should parents and caregivers, it could be even an aunt, uncle, or grandparent, whoever that is, right? What should they say, or how should they respond when a family member, be it whether it's a child or an adult or an elderly, says that, I'm tired of living, I'm not sure what to do anymore with my life, it's just hopeless. How should they respond?
I think the first thing is really listening to them and, really giving them that comfort that they are there. Because sometimes what children want is just the love, which was probably missing. So once they feel that they are being heard, their feelings are validated, most of their burden comes out. So a lot of times might be they are fearing that if my parents or grandparents, whoever they are with, will come to know what will happen. So that fear also drives them to all of the other things that is happening in their mind. So I think just by really listening to them well, validating their feelings, that's the first step. And then, of course, really looking for what exactly is the reason. Why are they behaving like this? What is the reason? If they feel that they are not able to help after a certain level, they can obviously take professional help from a counselor. They can go and so I think these two things should be done parallelly, along with taking them to for professional help, and also really after that looking at the child very well, observing them, how she's feeling, and making them very comfortable and heard.
Just adding on to that, I think something that I thought of while you were saying that, Shreya, was in a situation which can be incredibly sensitive. I think potentially the reason why that person may have reached out would be, as Priya said earlier, was a sense of tremendous hopelessness, that this is really their last sort of resource, is that there may be an understanding that this is a sensitive issue as well. So the family member involved may want to check with the individual that, whether they want to share this or not, because in a tight family situation, particularly where we were living with multi-generations, if that person was to take that, confidence, that sharing from the individual and go and share it with the rest of the family, it could potentially explode into a much bigger issue than what was originally intended. So I think maybe asking that individual as well, whether this is sensitive, if you would like it to keep it between us, it might reaffirm or reinforce that sense of companionship and trust in that individual as well.
Very true, Andrew. In fact, I've had a few clients who've actually admitted that all I wanted was somebody to just pay attention to me and listen to me. And candidly admitting, saying that everything else I tried didn't work. So I thought that I need to do this. So then at least they will wake up and then they will understand that, yes, I wanted that listening. And sometimes they don't need problem solving either. Like, I mean, they do understand that, the world's not going to change, or the boyfriend that betrayed them is not going to come back. And I think their rational brain tells them that, but they're still looking for that space where they can at least let their heart out. So I've had sessions sometimes where I've not done anything. I was just there, just listening. And it wasn't like we did some rocket science as counselors, or there was nothing really. It was just listening. And I've had like sessions back to back, and to a point where I've questioned myself, like, okay, what exactly am I doing here? Because at some point as a counselor, you're wondering, like, I didn't do anything. I just sat there for this. But really, that is what the client wanted, because he or she didn't have anybody else who would even hear them out. So even, when we are seeing something in our family, like there is a tendency, especially amongst parents, and I being a parent, I understand the parent's point of view. A child comes and says something like that, there is a tendency to brush it off, because it's like a protective mechanism as a parent, like, hey, don't say such a thing. How can you talk about yourself like this? Like, it's a very natural reaction that comes up. Like, you shouldn't talk about death like this, and you shouldn't be, there's a big should. You shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that. But I feel that, maybe we can take a step back, and instead of all the should and all of that, reach out and say, okay, looks like there's something really challenging right now. Do you want to share with me? We can just have a little walk. You just want to talk about it. And perhaps just talking about it will maybe lower the intensity of whatever that is overwhelming them. Sometimes they are so, like, we've not to go deep into the anatomy of it, but their brains are growing, right? So it's also they processing what is happening, and sometimes they find themselves quite it's challenging for them to process it. Like, on one hand they understand what's the right thing to do, but on the other hand there's a conflict going on within them, and sometimes just listening to them helps them resolve that conflict within themselves by themselves, and that, I think, is self-empowering for them as well. So I feel just really listening, and maybe just sitting there in the room in silence also, sometimes just holding their hand in silence also can help you tide through that, and let them know that there are people right there to support them. So yeah, I think one learning for me certainly has been, like, listening helps, and listening reaps a lot of rewards. So I think we just need to listen.
Yeah, I quite agree with the Priya saying. Listening is very powerful. And through the listening, actually client keep on talking is a way of reflection. So while they're talking, they reflect their thoughts as well. So it's the same process. If the parents, if can listen to their children, just let them vent out whatever in their mind, is helping the kids actually reflect what is really what they want. And it's so-called it's a connection in the deeper level, emotional level. Most of the time, parents and children are connected in the factual level. What do you do? How many marks you get? Have you do your homework? So all these are factual. And the kids can repeat the parents' words. And they took all these as mantra. Once you become mantra, it doesn't have any effect on the children. And children were avoiding the parents. They don't want to connect emotionally. So I think as a parents, when the kids give all these warning signs, we really need to know how to connect with the children emotionally at a deeper level, or create some meaningful activities together. Build up the bondings with the family members together, especially in this COVID period. Everyone's so stressful, everyone's so isolated. Family bondings with their children and with elderly is extremely important.
Thank you guys for sharing. I hear from the four of you, right, that the word listening came up very often, right? So sometimes, you know, that when we hear that someone says that life is meaningless, I don't want to live and nobody is going to miss me, and all those statements that starts coming out, I guess many people go through the initial stage, right, where our heart rate will increase because it comes from a lot of concern and cares, like, oh my God, what's happening with you, right? And I think the idea of that we don't need very high level skills to do this. Rather, listening is always the first step, right? So I just wanted to also encourage parents, friends, siblings, grandparents, whoever that's going to be listening into this, right? That the gift that you can give to that person in the moment is really your presence and definitely a listening ear. And sometimes we don't need to say anything, right? But being able to just say that, yes, I'm still here. I will walk this journey with you. I may not know what to do, but I will walk that journey with you. And whatever I cannot provide, I will link you up with the right people who can provide. So this hand in hand working of family plus the counselor or the therapist, right, is what I'm hearing from here that is very important, right? Because the first person they usually go to is not you and I. The reality of it. No one knocks on our door and say, hey, I feel like seeing you. No one usually does that, right? It's usually like something has gone really, really extreme in the family. And then they're like, okay, let me get professional help. But what the family has already started doing is providing that open communication, that I'm always with you. And the reality is family is 24/7. Therapists or counselors are there once a week, twice a week max, right? So the encouragement here again is definitely, I think was it Shreya or Shirley also mentioned about, besides listening, is to validate that yes, it's a difficult moment. That's reality. It is difficult. And it's not for you and I or anyone else to judge how difficult. It's difficult. Doesn't matter how difficult it is, but it is difficult, right? So I think that idea of listening, validating, building a sense of hope with them, that, you know, that I will be there to walk the journey with you. And I think Miss Priya also mentioned about seeing that I am seeing you, I'm hearing you, right? It's not like you're invisible person. You've said this and you walked off. You are there in my life. And just wondering also that what about for family who have lost a loved one to suicide, right? A family who has lost a loved one. How does the family move forward after the loss? What are some things they can do to move forward? I'm using the word move forward, not move on. Consciously not saying the word move on because there's really nothing to move on, right? The memory of that loved one, the experiences of that loved one will be with each person forever. So it's not about moving on. Really, I would say is how can we move forward?
I think many parents, when they have lost their loved one, they are constantly in denial, and the guilt is so overwhelming. And I think the first step they need to take to move forward after the loss of their loved one is to accept the reality of the loss. And I know that this can be very difficult, because when you go home, you know, the bedroom is there, the smell is there, and everything reminds the parents of the child, and the child is not there anymore. But I think the first thing that they may want to try is to accept the reality of the lost one, and allow yourself to experience the pain of grief. I mean, it's not just about children or family that left the world because out of suicide. Even like natural death, it's really difficult for people to accept the reality of the loss, and what more for those have lost to suicide, and experience the pain of grief, you know, rather than trying to numb it, trying to forget it, trying to do something else. Because when one bottle up their emotions, they're rejecting their feelings, it just make it really difficult for them to move forward. So to move with and through the loss is to accept the loss. I mean, I get so emotional talking about this, because I've encountered a friend, not a client, who have lost someone she loved from suicide. So it's really hard for them to accept it, because they are constantly asking themselves, what did they not do, or what did they do wrong? And it's like a vicious cycle, because these are all the unanswered questions that they have in their mind. And to adjust to the environment in which their loved one is missing, it's really hard. So sometimes people just lock the door and never open it for years. Some people, they just want to move, or some people, they just want to clean things out. So when you do these things, you're actually not allowing yourself to grieve. You're not allowing yourself to accept the loss. So again, I'm so sorry, I'm getting emotional, but yes.
No, this is what we want to talk about. We remember our topic is really no filter. Whatever you're experiencing, just to bring it out also, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, honey. Anyone else want to share?
I think it's I think what Hernie summed it up really very well. And Hernie, you probably got all of us also emotional in that process. But, you know, acceptance sometimes I find is, it's easier said than done. And I think for any family member, for any loved one, I mean, I was just thinking about, you know, when the news of Robin Williams came in, I don't know if you remember. It's not like any of us are personally, you know, connected to him, or you've spent even a minute with him. But I remember I was shaken, because you don't expect somebody who's made so many people laugh suddenly like, you know, take such a step. So when it is so close to home, or so close in your social environment, when you kind of didn't expect it, I think there is a burden of those unanswered questions that Hernie was talking about, right? And it does play through your mind again and again. And I feel during those times, you know, as grief always takes its time, right? I mean, closure doesn't happen overnight. Grief, even in just regular circumstances, also takes time. With this, there is this additional burden of all the what if I had done this, what if I had seen this, what if I had heard this, all of that. I think it's really very important also to be very compassionate towards your own self, and compassionate towards the people who are grieving at that time. And people will have different reactions at different times. So if there are siblings of the child who has committed suicide, they may go through their mood swings, you may go through your mood swings, there may be situations that may trigger you, you may break down, and I think all of that will happen. But I think it's very important to kind of be easy on yourself. it is a very overwhelming situation. It's not like a very normal circumstance, and you need to as much as we train ourselves to become accepting of the fact and all, we'll go through our times of denial, we'll go through our times of fighting with what the reality is, but I think we just need to be a little bit more kinder to ourselves and understand that not everything is under our control. Not every sign you would have picked on. So something that you hinted at earlier, Sunita, that it's not humanly possible to keep a tab on every single thing that you could have picked up on. And I think at that point in time, just to remember that you are human, you're doing your best, and you just have to be kinder to yourself. You have to give yourself time, and it takes time to get over and move forward also. I don't know if you ever get over this, but even moving forward sometimes can take time.
Thank you, Hani and Priya, for sharing that. Right. The thing that came out very strongly for me again and again was the time factor that you all spoke about. That it will take time, and I just wanted to say, don't rush. Personally, I get very frustrated when people tell my clients, right, that it's already been a year, it's already been 2 years. Why is anyone counting, right? So each of us grieve very differently. You can grieve for 10 years, and that's okay if that is your journey, right? There is really no train to catch, let me put it that way, right? So I think this part is really important, that we each of us deal with grief very differently. And grief when it's sudden loss is very different from when someone passes through after long years of being bedridden and all. It's very, very different. And there's really no basis of comparison. So that idea of time, accepting that I may need a long time, being compassionate to yourself, super important. And that part, I think Priya, you mentioned about people ask the question of what if. It's such a dangerous question in the mind, right? What if I did this? What if I was there? What if? And many of my clients who, for example, when they were at home and it happened, they're like, what if I had just opened the door and went in? What if I had spoken to him or her longer? What if I had just sent that message? So this what if leads to a lot of guilt for whoever that remains, whether it's a family member or a friend. And I just wanted to reassure the people who are around, the family members and friends who are around, that when these questions of what if comes up, please be compassionate to yourself. Even a lot of psychiatrists, psychologists, counselors miss the signals, right? So what I'm trying to say here is that what if is not helpful. Whenever it comes up, let it be there, but need not entertain it too much, because the what if can be a few thousands, right? And when people are very determined, sometimes it can be difficult, right? To stop them. At the same time, we know that if they have someone to sit down with and talk to for a while, usually that strong feeling of wanting to commit suicide will also pass. So the best thing we can do is just to sit there with that person, even when we have nothing to say. And when we reject these strong emotions, what happens is your body stores it, right? So when our body stores it, we suffer in the long run. So sometimes I would say suffer in that shorter run of a couple of years, going through these strong emotions. When the long run, it helps us, right? And just as I was saying that, after to come to us as people in the helping field, right? When we work with clients who are suicidal, and we may even have lost clients to suicide, my understanding is, and I know I do get affected even when my clients talk about suicide, and we have talked about this before, where some of us end up messaging more often to our client just to check in if they're okay. Sometimes we don't sleep too well because we're still thinking about them, that like, have I done enough, for example, right? So just wondering that how do you guys cope, being in the mental health field, or how do you cope when your clients talk about suicide?
I have to say it's tough. I'm going to be very honest. It is tough. There was a time when I had multiple such clients, And I came to appreciate mindfulness far, far more during that time, because it is a huge grounding technique for me. And at times you have to very consciously, literally, like, separate yourself from that, and which is also our profession. As much as we empathize with our clients, and we want to be authentic, we're aware of transference, counter transference, but at some level we are also human. It's difficult to see somebody in so much pain. And to be objective during that time, I have to make sure that I show up in a space where I am objective and I'm not emotional. So, it's, and when I say not emotional, meaning not that I can't empathize with the person, but I can't be dysfunctional in my empathy. Let me put it this way. So I have to make that very clear distinction. And as Sunita said, that yes, there have been times when I've had a sleepless night. There have also been times when I have gone outside of office hours and I have continued texting my clients just to make sure that, there is someone. Sometimes clients are alone, especially during COVID. Not everybody had family around them, right? And the only close person that they know at that point is you. So they feel more comfortable talking to you versus calling up SOS. And I just feel like that is something that comes with the territory, comes as a human being, and you need to be there as much as you can possibly can. So it is tough. One thing that I do always tell my clients, and I do it for myself, is get moving. I think just getting outdoors, exercising, whether it is just for half an hour, whether it is whatever. Singapore has lots of parks, go explore that. But I think that is another place which is a good coping mechanism. Certainly, it's a very healthy coping mechanism. And I think it's also healthy physically as well, especially in the times where we are just all sitting at our laptops. But yeah, these two things have been really my coping mechanisms, so to speak. Yes, I do connect with my clients, sometimes with clients, caregivers or family members, just to kind of tide over that time, because I think that is essentially the need of the hour. As I said, sometimes it is nothing else. We're not problem solving. We're not fixing their external worlds in any form. We're just there. And I think that is what we need to provide to them. But it is a challenging turf. I will not deny it. I'm being very, very honest. Yes.
For me, it's the same. It weighs heavily on me because I, especially working with the younger group, and I often have to deal with this consistent worry, consistent fear. It makes me feel uneasy when my client is out of sight. It comes to the extent that when the session is over, and I know that they're big enough to call the Grab themselves, and even the slightest thing like that, it makes me feel so uneasy to just leave them on their own. And sometimes I can't help but text them multiple times a week. But on top of that, one challenge that I have experienced also is is the professional side, because I need to be aware, and I need to consistently remind myself that there are some things that need to be reported, especially when I'm dealing with an underage client. And this is where the heaviness comes in, because when it comes to the disclosure, and I'm often worried that it will rupture the counselor-client relationship, and then it's going to increase my client's risk of suicide. So these are the two things that I always go through when I'm dealing, when I'm with a younger client. Not only I can't really sleep and I can feel easy when they're out of my sight, I'm also worried that there are some things, or there's a moment that I have to approach someone else to talk about the danger, the risk of this person actually doing it. And again, the relationship between the counselor and client, it means a lot to me, especially when you have invested a lot of time, especially when you've seen this person open up. So that's how the challenges that I go through. And how do I cope with it is mentorship, supervision. I make sure that I have someone to talk to, like Dr. Sunita here. Because we counselors, we are also human. Like for me, I do feel, and I worry. We're not made of steel, so we do feel. So for me, talking, of course, on top of doing meditation and mindfulness, that's my personal side. I cope through talking to people within the profession, especially someone who is your mentor, and it helps tremendously because these things, they are heavy, and for me, I can't possibly bottle it up all the time, because then it's going to affect my other clients. So that's me.
Thank you, Honey. Shreya, were you gonna share?
Yeah, I think few of the points while Honey was talking, I too had those on my mind. So I think it's a very fine balance. Definitely, we feel a lot whenever our clients are going through this, and checking on my clients, and we do get afterthoughts after that. But I think what I really consciously do is to really observe myself and be ready for the case whenever I have to meet the client. So I do consciously practice self-care a lot, and so that my mind is clear and calm. And so I have my methods of self-care, what I do, meditation, outdoor walking. And definitely, if it gets a lot, then I will talk about it to my supervisor, and through supervision, I will discuss the case and present whatever difficulties and challenges also that if it's happening. So yeah, I think those two things have to be a very fine balance has to be maintained.
Thank you, Shreya. So sorry, Shirley, please say.
Yes, okay. I think it's always challenging for counselor try to save a life, but in the end, we can't do it because the people, we still lost it. And it's tremendous emotional attack to us. So sometimes I use the example like doctor, right? Medical doctor. They do whatever they can. They actually give the most comfort to the patients. They do the the best of their ability to the surgeries, but still during the process, you're lost in the person. So for me, use this kind of the comfort. If one day I do all the best I can, I still lose my client in whatever way. And it happens to many counselors, and a very well-known counselor I know in Singapore. They do their best, but in the end, they still lose your client. Eventually, they have to also, like Priya and Helani and Shreya said, they need go for the mentors, they go for the supervision to calm the kind of feeling of guilt. Yeah, no matter how good we are, sometimes the people's mind, the fix is very hard to change. Very hard. But as long as we do our best ability, we help our client, we build a therapeutic relation, we care for them, like Honey says, text almost a few times a day, a week, we do our part. And we also have, I think we need to know how to cope. Also in the event it happens, how to cope our own emotions. That is very important. Yeah.
Thank you, Shirley. So what I'm hearing from every one of you is definitely you're impacted. I think this is important for people who are hearing us also to know that exactly as what was said earlier, right? We are not steel, we are not iron or something. All of us experience the emotions. I know when my clients, siblings, and all that, when they commit suicide, or people that I know, even though they're distant, I still experience the wave of emotions. Even though they were not sitting in front of me as my client, I still experience those wave of emotions. And when some of people that I supervise, when they lose a client, you can see how badly the counselor goes through for weeks and weeks, sometimes months. And sometimes they cannot handle the next client anymore, right? Because it becomes so deep for us, because losing any life is difficult, right? And when you are walking that journey with the person, you start to judge yourself. Same question, what if, right? So while our clients and parents and whoever go through the what if, so do we. The only difference perhaps is that maybe we have 5% more in our toolbox that helps us a little bit, right? So I think that helps a little bit to challenge our own thinking, to get supervision. And many of us in this team, I think particularly all of us in this team, practice mindfulness and meditation, and many of us here are trained in that also. I think the other thing that's very important, especially for fellow counselors who might be listening, and is managing our boundaries. Doesn't mean detach, but the idea of that, yes, this has happened. I do need to also manage my emotions by getting supervision, going into that outdoor. Simple things like sunlight helps us a lot. Sometimes the things are so simple, but we look for the most complicated solution, right? But just being in the outdoor, going into the sun, going into nature, all of these things are so helpful. And if you have to sit there and cry, then that's all you do. It's okay. So I also wanted us to just be very real that counselors too struggle. We too have our own challenges in life. We do go through it. We do struggle when we lose our clients. There's a reality of it. And we too turn to others for help. So I just wanted to be very open that we too go for help. We're not only saying for our clients and anyone out there to go for help, but we too go for it, right? So it's really, we're not preaching otherwise. Let's put it that way, right? We're really not preaching otherwise. We get help, whether it's peers like ourselves here or through our supervisors, but we too get help. Now, I do know that we have been together for about an hour or so. I was just going to invite each one of you to share a parting word or something that you would like our viewers or listeners to take back from this talk.
I don't mind sharing something first, and I think it would be, a fairly simple message, but something that came up a couple of conversations ago was particularly for people who are suffering from bereavement, that you're also not alone. I think that it is a very personal journey, of course. Losing someone, it's one of the most personal things that you could go through. But at the same time, others have probably suffered, and I think that universality that you can share in with others, whether it be support groups or resources, it wouldn't even need to just be in Singapore. I think there are a number of resources globally now where you can speak to people, share with them, and also understand that the journey that they've been through in healing from that process can be tremendously helpful as well. So don't feel like you're alone. Be open to reaching out and speaking to others about it as well.
Yeah, so adding on to what Andrew said, don't feel alone. And just to say that reaching out for help is not a weakness. As Sunita just said, that all of us here, in spite of the fact that, we're trained in this field, we also reach out for help. So there is absolutely nothing to feel bad or weak or sad about if one reaches out for help. At some level, that is what we are for, to be there for each other, right? Irrespective of our professional capacities. So this is simply to say that you may feel that you are alone, you may feel that nobody is listening, but there is always one door that is open and you can reach out for help, and you should reach out for help. I think that is something that I would request each and every listener to kind of understand, that we all need help at some point or the other, and we should seek that help.
Yeah, I think one message which I would like to give to all the listeners would be to be compassionate, because that's something which is very, very powerful. And just, small things, sometimes we are hard on ourselves and that just keeps on mounting. So just practicing self-compassion, and it's really, I've personally, whenever I've done it, I've felt tremendous changes. So I think, and as Sunita said, that sometimes things needn't be very complicated. Very, very simple things are in front of us, but we try to go and look for some complicated things. So just practicing mindfulness, meditation, as we know the benefits, and going outdoors, all these things are very easy and simple to do. And just to summarize what we all have said about listening and really being there, I think, yeah.
And to add to that, again, like, it is really important to know that you are not alone. There's always someone out there for you, and don't lose hope, because again, there's always someone there to listen to you. And practice self-care, and again, take every moment as it is, and if it gets overwhelmed, you can reach out to somebody.
For these sessions, I want to share one Chinese words. Always people say 黎明前的黑暗是最黑暗的, which means before the dawn, the dark is the most dark. Yeah, so this is the most difficult time. As long as you pass through that darkness period, the dawn will comes, and the light, the sunshine will come into your life. Just pass through that period, you will gain the most bright day in the life. Okay.
Thank you. And I will share what's going through my mind also is I think this idea of you are important. I'm not sure how else to say this, but the idea is that each one of us in this room and each one of the people who are listening in, you are important. It may not feel like in that moment, especially when we are feeling low or upset, but the reality is you are important. And to every person who has ever known you, it is meaningful. And I have spoken to groups of people who have lost someone whom is only an acquaintance. So they say it's only an acquaintance, but yet I can't sleep anymore since this person has committed suicide. So to the person who is going through that difficult moment, it looks like it doesn't matter. No one will miss me and all that. But the reality is you are important. Every person who has touched your life in some manner will miss you. We are definitely here for you. And I can confidently say that anyone in the helping profession is definitely there for you. It's really a call away, a text away, a message away. There are just so many avenues right now, which I'm really grateful for. And the other thing is, for people who are supporting, or who are around the person who is going through that low moment in life, all you and I need to do is just listen and listen and listen and listen, even if you don't know what to say, right? And I think everyone here has mentioned that many times. Just listen, right? And to the person going through that moment, please be kind to yourself, right? There are many ways to be kind, but all I want to say is please be kind to yourself. Thoughts will come in, right? Like those dark moments will come in. But the idea is that these dark moments will pass, right? Look forward to the next day or the next moment. And if need be, call a friend, call a family member, call SOS line. There are many people willing to listen, right? But the idea of not giving up, just make that phone call. I think that's the first step towards anything that we want to do. So thank you, guys. So thank you, Andrew, Priya, Shirley, Honey, and Shreya for joining in here and going through this entire conversation, right? And also willing to really be, in that sense, unfiltered, right? As we are speaking here today. As we end later, what I will be doing is, at the end of the video, I will be sharing some helplines. And many of this, some are helplines, some are chat box and things like that, where, depending on the mode that you prefer. And of course, you could call anyone in this team also, right? But the intention really, really is that there is help. That's the key thing I want to say. There is help. Please just reach out. And if anything, take it as baby step. You take one step, someone will take one step with you, right? So that's the most important thing. Just take that first step. I'm very confident somebody will take that step with you, right? So thank you for listening in to us, and thanks team for having this conversation so openly. So we are going to be pausing here for today.